down. I'm the one you call when you need a tin up or down. I'm a tin rental man, I'm working all day, getting those stakes in the ground no matter what they say. From sunrise to the night, I make sure everything's right. Yeah, I'm a tin rental man, I'm working all day.
Welcome back to another episode of Under the Vinyl, a rental management media podcast. We'll go ahead and jump right in here. We got a real good guest on today, an industry veteran. We're going to talk a little bit about some hot topics going on in the industry with some codes, as well as a new structure that has come out, a couple new structures that have come out that we really love and that people don't know quite a bit about. So we'll jump into that. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mike Cruz. Mike, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, guys. How you guys doing?
Great. It's great to have you on.
It's highly important the things you guys are doing and talking about here. Just really does have meaning and impact out here, and I really appreciate you guys what you guys are doing. It's important for our industry, and it's from me being an older guy from way back in the day. I've been going to been involved in different areas of with organizations, IFAI and ARA and all the things, and continuing on those things and having guys like you being involved with this, making this thing a safer and better better industry is it's good for the industry.
Well, it's also good for the industry to keep people like you around. So we're glad that you decided to jump right back into this craziness with us, and jump into some good topics here today, and just kind of go over some things. But what have you been doing, Mike? Where you been?
Well, so it's been interesting the last last couple of years. So you guys, just a little bit about me. I was born and raised here in Evansville, Indiana. That's where I'm actually at this week. I'm at Anchor at the factory, and for the last 15 years, I've been living down in Hollywood, Florida, and just recently moved to Nashville, Tennessee, to get a little closer to the kids and grandkids and family and work. And honestly, I was a little bit done with South Florida. 8 months of summer was enough for me. There are no breaks. There are no cold fronts that come through. None of that stuff happens. So it's been really exciting over the last couple of months, getting back in here and getting closer to the family and being closer to work up here. So everything's been good, busy. Everything's picking up again as well.
That's awesome. Have you guys had any cool installs that you've sold recently that you've been on?
Yeah, I just I just went up to Long Island and traveled with a couple of our outside reps. You guys know them probably pretty well, Danny Dalton and Mike Fenton, and we had an 18 meter by 27 meter that was built and designed for an outdoor deck that we had to crane everything in. We even the equipment from the ground up there, just to get it put together, had to be craned in. There was no way to get the equipment up there, so those are always fun to get out and do those kind of jobs. Everybody gets tired of the standard, just slugging up the tent and down it comes. But yeah, it's kind of fun when you get a custom job and you get out of the norm a little bit. So that was a fun project.
This episode of Under the Vinyl is brought to you by Anchor Tents and Clearspans, a fifth-generation family-owned company making tents and clearspan structures right here in the USA. Anchor isn't just about selling the best products on the market. They share decades of experience and stand beside you as you grow your business. Anchor's craftsmanship and engineering give you a peace of mind and will allow you to use the equipment for years to come, season after season. For the next generation of rental owners and installers, Anchor aims to not just be your supplier, but a trusted partner helping guide you into the right products to grow your business. Call to be connected to your sales rep today, 1-800-544-4445, or visit their website at anchorinc.com. Mike, what is your current role over there at Anchor?
So I take care of basically the Clearspan division for Anchor Industries, and then I play. I've been playing a little bit of a role here, over the last couple of years in our warehousing side of business. That's been a big, kind of a thing that we've been putting quite a bit of time on. We see kind of where the market space is going, so I've been bouncing back and forth between those two things. But then this last 6 months or so, I've really put some effort back into the Clearspan side of our business. And there's a lot of places to go out there and put up Clearspan, and some of it long term, some of it's just the short term and the daily rental stuff. But there is a difference between those two, and there needs to be focus. They're not just the same type of products going out there. They look the same. They look like a duck, quack like a duck, walk like a duck, but they're not ducks. So they are different.
And we're going to jump into some of those ones here coming up, but just give us a little bit about how that conversation of sales has just changed over the last decade that you've seen.
It is really interesting. I mean, I'll just go way back. I started at Anchor Industries in 1990, and it was really interesting. I mean, we were selling. I mean, we had at that time 60 wide Century was out. I mean, it was things structure was around, but you know it also was a deal where I literally would get a call from a customer. I would take down the notes of what he wanted. I would write it up and give it to our secretary, and she would mail the quote to the client, and then he would call back and say, "Yeah, I've looked over your quote and it's good to go." And that's obviously, changed over time, to today's date where if you can't, you're on the phone with them, if you don't have an answer in 4 seconds, it's like, what's going on? What's taking so long to get this done? And I think the other side of it is that in today's world, a lot of great companies out there, renting tents and buying tents, and it's because of this type of podcast and the other organization that we've done, we've become a much better industry. So I think the sales end of it, from my standpoint, has been we've had to be educated. We used to be able to just get by with, oh yeah, it's a 60 wide, and now the engineering behind it, and whether it's temporary engineering or long term engineering, it's a different kind of sales approach right now.
Do you feel like the expectations are different then? Are they higher, lower? What were we at?
I think that the expectations are higher today. I think back in the earlier days when I was doing it, and a lot of companies still do this. Obviously, if there's a mistake on site, your tent guys, you're going to figure it out. That's kind of what we do. But in today's world, I think there's so much more that goes into the sale before the sale versus what it used to be. It was just, hey, just throwing another couple 20-foot mids for 40-foot party tent or pole tent. And today there's just a lot of discussion about engineering and how it's going to be engineered and the permitting process. So I think that the education piece of it from our world is different. And I also think that the folks are different. There are some. I'm the last year of a baby boomer, so I'm a relationship. I want to get on the phone and talk and walk through and make sure you understand everything that you're getting with this. And we have some folks out there that today, if they could just add a 30 meter by 60 meter to the cart, they would do it, and away it would go. So that's been a little different, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's a time and a place for that. I think that building those relationships as a salesman myself, I mean, building those relationships in general and shaking somebody's hand and seeing them face to face is great. And we've talked about this a lot, where I don't feel like people want to see you as much anymore, but they still want to know you're there. And to me, I feel like I still want to make an appearance. It just might not be as often, but there it is great when we're on the fly. We don't have to bother you, and we can jump right in and see what that pricing is and grab it, or that way we don't feel like we're burdening the salesperson.
Right, right. I think the relationship piece of it is still, a vital part of it, and I say that because if there's somebody out there and they're spending, just pick a number and throw it out there. Just say they're spending 50 grand a year with your company. They have somewhat of an intimate relationship with somebody in the sales department. You're not just. I mean, they've got somebody they know, somebody they're trying to reach out to, somebody they're going to want to be contacting. So it's not just this, hey, we can just do everything online and we can just get it from YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff. In this industry, I don't think that ever goes away, and we shouldn't let it go away. I think it's important as manufacturers that we stay as engaged, and you literally have to, with today's engineering and the way it's always changing, and to be up to speed, you've just got to be on top of that.
Correct. And I feel like it says a lot about what manufacturer you choose early on by building those relationships.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's we always talk about it here. It's kind of a joke. I mean, and I don't think that it really isn't a joke at the end of the day. But when you do your due diligence and you're making that decision on who you're going to partner with, it's pretty important, man, because it's a marriage, and divorce is ugly and hard and nasty and expensive, and it is in this industry as well. So it's really important that you get out there up front and do your homework and find somebody that's going to be work with you and that has the education, to get you going the right way. That's what we do as salesmen. We're always, we certainly will sell you anything that you want, but we're also there to provide, a little instruction and, our background and, things we've been, up against along the way. So that part doesn't go away, I don't think.
Which is exactly why we will dive into this new Vixen product. And I'm biased now because it's in my inventory, and I love it. I think it's a fantastic product that's come to market here. specifically for the 4 meter leg, the 5 meter bays, and for that profile. So, Mike, tell me what the vision behind the whole system was.
The vision behind it was, Anchor offers a lot of products, and that could be structure, it could be the hybrid tents, which are the track systems, they still have to be guide out, they still keter, and so we've always been at this level where we've been really good from about 15 meter and above, and never really a very good entry level tent. And so many of the things that I over as I'm out dealing with the customers, a lot of the things that we come up with here at Anchor doesn't. It's not because I had some great idea about something out there. It's because we're dealing with you guys out there, and you know what the pain spots are, and you know where you're struggling, and we try to listen to those things, and so we bring that back into Anchor. And one of the things that that stood out to me was these smaller entry level buildings that you're getting into, and it goes right back into that customer. Once you get married, you're married. And for us, we didn't really have a very good viable entry level product into the ClearSpan line. So, we were losing out on a lot of those opportunities. And so I was looking at some of the things that I thought were going to be important, and some of the pain spots that I was hearing out there. And a 4 meter upright on the smaller buildings was a pain spot. Anytime you're putting a 3 meter leg up next to a 4 meter, your work's just beginning. How are you sealing that? How you're going to gutter, stop the water? Just a lot of things that this building does. Now, for us, I thought it was important that we get to this 4 meter eve height and this 3 meter and 5 meter bay, because that's just where the marketplace was driving us to go. I mean, it just through all the feedback and everything we were getting, that's just kind of where it led us. And so we went into it with knowing that we might, to get that 4 meter eve height out to all the way out to 15 meters. We knew we were going to have to be a slightly bigger profile to make that happen. But we still think it was the right move. So at that entry level stage of structure, we're kind of at the higher end of that entry level. But it's been worth the things that we have done to it.
And the big thing for me, like I said, is the 4 meter leg. I love the 4 meter leg and the 5 meter base. So just tell us about the install efficiencies that like you have felt that you've seen through, other customers, as well as, the engineering simplicity of that, and just to reduce the hardware complexity. Cause I feel like there's a lot of hardware that is like super complex on a lot of structures, and this one is super easy.
Yeah, that's something we really took a hard look at. I mean, literally, yeah, if you look at most structures, your main profile, your rafters and your legs are the bigger profile, right? And then your usually your gable framing is a little bit smaller, the next size profile down, because it's not quite as on the gable framing piece of it. There's not quite as much engineering designed necessary for the gable framing. So, but what we did is we kept it all the same profile. So a gable upright is a main upright, is a rafter. So it's all the same profiles. We also took this thing to a level with the glass system to more of a pressure plate system instead of in between the uprights, which was, in my opinion, I'm a rotor guy. I've been a rotor guy and anchor guy for a long time, but it was an older design, and the glass in between the uprights, because every profile is a slightly different width on the profile, so that gap was always a little bit different, and it was a nightmare. It's a problem for our customers. So this VXN was just really an opportunity for us to really take a whiteboard and really look at all the things that were out there, and really try to hit those spots that were going to just make it easier for the installer. I mean, and that the 5 meter bay instead of the 3 meter bay, you just think from the standpoint of loading and unloading and your labor on the site, it's less arches, it's all the things that go along with that. And the going from to a 4 meter upright up to the building that you're connecting to is also another big piece of it. It allows you to not have all the gaga foo-foo work that you have to do after it's done. It's the building's easy. It's always the gaga foo-foo that takes forever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, with that, what do you feel like the real world, benefits for the crew and rental companies for that? I feel like I was talking with somebody the other day, just about, we were talking about the difference in the F3 and the Vixen, right? We were talking more along the 9 meter Vixen, 30 wide F3, and they were asking me, what do you think about it? And I said, well, what are you looking for in it? And so we're talking a little bit about it, and I feel that you could almost do a Vixen at this point with the simplicity of it as quick as, or pretty close to, as an F3. So, like for a mid-sized company,
Yeah, I wouldn't say. I would say right. I would say it's pretty close to, and I think that's the other thing. Just going to taking a step back here and talking about the structure, the beginning structure. It's hard to say you're jumping into the structure business and you're going to start out with a 25-meter building, right? So you've got to start out. Most guys are starting out with something smaller than that, and and again, it really comes down to they're both very very good products, and from a time standpoint, it really comes down to the aesthetics and what it looks like and what the customers wanting for that event. I mean, and we're just continually working on trying to make things easier and faster, and like with our building, there's just not tons of different bolt sizes. Germany with all their engineering, they can be bad about they make a bolt for every different piece of the tent, and that bolt works everywhere until you get to the point where you have to have it, and then you've got the
yeah,
wrong size, right? So that's typically what happens. So we spend a lot of time trying to make like parts and pieces, and so that it's just more simplistic when you guys get out
yeah,
on the job site.
understand. And just give us a little background on what's been like the most popular widths of this product and applications and just uses.
Yeah, it really is just on mainly in just a special event side, and there are just all kinds of uses out there. But I would say probably the 9 and 12 have been probably more the key type products that we've been going out there with right now. And again, at Anchor we have lots of 40 wides. You can pick many different options for a 40 wide, but you as a dealer out there, you've got to know your segment, your market segment, what you're doing, where you're trying to go with it. And that could very easily be that the VXN is the wrong product for a job that an F3 would be the perfect product for. So we're always just looking to try to through listening to you guys, and a lot of that feedback comes and our improvements come from you guys that own the product out there for us. We try to design, and it's really interesting because in the earlier years when I was working in Evansville up here, and we were doing design work on stuff, and I would have our engineers back there go, hey, we've got everything designed. So I'd be out in the field, and all of a sudden we're running into problems, and I'm coming back in there, and they're going, it can't be. And I'm going, well, see, the difference is you're working here in perfect CAD where everything's flat and level and always works. And let me show you why it doesn't work out here. So,
Hmm.
we take a lot of those things into consideration, and we try to, work out much of that stuff as we can before it gets to the end user or to the dealer out there, so that, it's seamless for you guys.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the best way to do it. It's like, if you're not getting the feedback or taking the feedback from the outside, you're always going to be stuck in that computer mind, and it's tough. It's tough, but you got to take the feedback all around from everybody as a whole. I mean, even just the guys installing it out there, I mean, can give you so much intel.
Oh, well, listen, I've always said that the best information we get anytime we're designing a product is we should be having a team, geographically, kind of around the country of different folks that we're interested in having, and, getting their feedback on it, and really, from the front end of this thing, really from the design work, because, you're always in a hurry. Every manufacturer is always looking for this next new thing out there, right? And every year somebody wants to come out with something new. And if it was easy, we'd have something new and great and designed, every
Every
year in
year.
this thing, right? So it's not easy, and we work really hard to try to get something that's going to go out there that is not just a one off. And I feel like there's a lot of great things that are being manufactured and produced by most of the manufacturers out there, but they're one off kind of things, instead of something that really is what's driving your business, with the normal up and down, and how you develop and get better at the product. If you're putting up something different every time you're going out, without some kind of consistency within the product itself, it becomes complicated for you guys out there.
Well, and we always say we don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? But at the same time, to your point on the new products, you can come out with some crazy new wicked structure every year, and I mean, that structure may not stick, but this is a style that is going to stick and is going to be around, and so you're not necessarily reinventing the wheel; you're improving everything. I feel like, and You made it faster. You made it more, made it easier for the smaller guys, as well as just overall. I mean, at the end of the day, we operate on labor costs, right? And any savings that we can have in labor is huge. And for me, I feel like for us jumping into something like that with the 5 meter spacing, it's already made it faster and more easy on site for everybody, and the guys love it. And like I said, I've preached about it before on this podcast, but the bolts and everything, just everything being like the same, the pins, and it's the simplicity of everything that has really made it for us.
And then we have to take it to the next level. Obviously, you come out with the A-frame. That's the basic building of it. But then you've got to have curved top for the thing. You've got to have shaped ends. You've got to be able to put an octagon end or a hex end on it, and a high peak. Possibly somewhere down the road. And when you're designing this thing, when you're coming out with a design on the front end, in order to make sure that that very beginning building is what you want, when you start doing all these add-ons to it, so that again, everything is seamless, and you say, oh well, we should have thought about what was going to happen on this glass right here when we put this hex end on this thing. There's just from start to finish on these things, it's a little bit of a journey. It takes some time and some forethought. And I've always been a proponent and fan of when we are designing, before we actually introduce, is to handpick some guys out in the field and are out in the industry, and put it in their hands and let them beat this thing around for a summer, and just come back and tell us what they really think. And then, but what they think and what we could do with that product at that time. But at the end of the day, you got to get it out there, right? And so, but that's kind of where we are on the VXN. But we're moving very quickly towards all those things that I just said. We've already got a design on the curved top for it. We've already got the layout for the shaped ends, so that's all in place. It's just somewhat new, and we just haven't done any of it yet.
Well, and that's smart to get it out there. And I remember back in the day when I worked at Bryanson, the Aurora first came out, and you guys shipped me the Aurora itself, and said, "Here, use it. Go put it up for a month and see how you guys like it. Use it and beat it up a little bit." And then that ultimately made me purchase it from you all when I was there, just because we were able to really get our hands on it and utilize the product for a month, and it was a cool way to get it out there. So I think you guys did really good on things like that.
I mean, and it has to be something really bad for you to come back and say, "Hey, we've just decided we don't want this." I mean, it's a nice ploy. It works really well for both sides, because we wouldn't be putting all the time and effort into it, to be putting it out there and not think that we were going to have success with it. But what validates that success is having it in the hands of guys like you, to make sure that we've hit the mark on this thing.
Well, kind of staying on that path of the new product and things coming out and what you guys are really diving into. I know you guys have dive deep into this new permanent structure and warehouse applications, and you got a great new product that has been rolled out, and you're really getting into it more. And I know this is kind of the way of the future. And it seems like a lot of companies are trying to get more of these long-term rentals and things like that. This is not a product that's going to be for everybody, but give us a little background on why the warehousing and semi-permanent structure demand has really exploded and what this product is about.
I think there's a few reasons out there. One of the first reasons for us to think about when we were coming out with this product is, obviously, we were getting calls on it. I mean, there was a demand out there, so we kind of knew there was a demand. We knew there was a product, and we wanted to try to get involved in this thing. The other thing that we see in the industry is there's a lot of acquisitions and mergers and private equity buyouts, and there's X amount of product being put out into the special event industry every year. And let's just face it. I mean, we've been you know this by everybody you talk to. It's a bit mature. It's a bit saturated at times. But I do think that through all this acquisition and mergers and everything, that it does spawn a new round of people coming into the business, because it has to, because those people get so focused on the big things that these other segments kind of get left behind, and it forces people into that industry. But where we really saw this thing was when you start looking at the companies out there like United Rental, Sunbelt, WillScot. I mean, those aren't small companies. Those companies have done some legwork and some background work to go in and figure out that, hey, there's a demand out there, and that demand is for it can be sporting, big sport event. It could be immigration. It could be these data centers that are coming out. All this stuff is just coming on. And what really was driving this thing is that in order to go out for those longer term projects, we as a company always live in this temporary code world, and these products were demanding permanent code. And so that's kind of was the beginning piece of it, to say, okay, well, if we're going to do this, we've got to be able to separate the temporary from the permanent, and what's that look like? Because when you start looking at that warehouse space out there, and you compare it to the special event space that we live in right now, I don't know what the real number is, but it's got to be
Yeah.
tenfold. Maybe
Oh
maybe
yeah.
big, maybe a hundredfold. I don't know what it is, but so what was the complicated part for us in the beginning of this was, where do we fit in this big space? That's maybe the most complicated thing is, we know we've got a great product, we know it's engineered for long term use, which means it has the permanent engineering behind it. But where do we go with it? Because there's a lot of people in this space out there, so that's taken us a minute to kind of figure that out a little bit.
Well, and walking through the new warehouse product that you do have, and you got it in your yard out back there, right? You guys utilize it as a company, correct?
Yeah. That was one of the first things we did. We went down this path about, it was before COVID, and we really tried to set up something separate from Anchor, from the normal stuff that we did at Anchor, and try to put some focus on it, and got a guy, and he was out knocking on doors, and I mean, it developed us along a little bit, but it didn't really get us to where we needed to get until here in just probably the last, I'd say, 3 years. We really stepped into this thing and said, hey, you know what? We do have the product, and we kind of went through the same thing with this warehouse product because it was a German designed product that we were looking at, and because of that, there were just a lot of pieces and parts that were different and stuff. So the very first thing we did is we came in and basically just did a complete redesign on the building. I mean, not a different profile or anything like that, but just how things go together, and you know, and making things a little bit more interchangeable between the sizes of buildings, so that if you're putting up a 25, well, the 20 gets it this way, the 25 gets it this way. So that took a little while to get up and going, but once we got that going and got this thing to where it is right now, we're having a lot of success with this thing. We're getting, I mean, there is a huge demand for this out there, and how you find and where you find yourself in this marketplace is the hard part. That's getting there.
Well, and I think the thing about this product, it's done the right way, right? So, common mistakes, and we'll talk a little bit about this, but there's some common mistakes that companies make when entering the warehouse market, right? Ultimately, a lot of these people are getting calls from either a third party or they're getting it direct, and they're saying, "Hey, I need this structure, this size, yada yada yada," right? Okay, so we ultimately see it as, okay, well, that's a year-long rental. That's just mailbox money. That's going to be great, right? But what a lot of people don't think about is the snow loads, the engineering, the different things that go into that. So when you go out and you put up a smaller frame structure that can't hold a snow load or ice or anything like that, and you're out in the middle of Michigan, let's say somewhere, and it gets into wintertime and that year-long rental is still out there, people don't think a lot about that. And they think that, we can just go out there, push the snow off and everything else. But what do you see that are some common mistakes that people make on this type of stuff? And what was the idea about how you engineered this product and how you really pushed to make it a real safe product to call it a warehouse product?
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that, because that's what a lot of the rental group thinks out there, is that, oh, hey, it's a structure, because it's a structure, I can just go out and put this thing up for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and in some applications you can, and you get away with it, and there's no problem. There are places that works. What I found is that a few people that were trying to make that a business model, we're finding out that what they're really end up trying to do is they're trying to take a product and that wasn't designed to go out and do that, and design it in the field to make it work the best they can. And so they're back and forth all the time with this, air's coming in here, water's leaking here, hey, we're gonna get 16 inches of snow tonight, so the temporary buildings just aren't designed for that. So what we knew is coming into this thing is that we've got to take all of that noise out of the beginning of the equation. So we know that it's pre-engineered on the front end up to, to the permanent code, which is, in the permanent code, it's just different. I mean, you just meet, the International Building Code as a permanent building, or you don't.
Yeah.
The temporary code's a different deal altogether. But in the engineering behind the permanent code, it's very fixed on what it is. I mean, it's just dictated. You're going to get this much snow load, and like with our building, we'll take this warehouse building right now from 15. Most of it's 15 meter to 30 meter, and and the bigger demand is 30 meter. The other thing you get with these buildings, from an engineering standpoint, that you don't get with the temporary coat is that, once you get to a 4 meter leg, for the most part, you're pretty well maxed out unless
Right.
you're dealing with a very big profile, 300 millimeters, 334 or bigger, kind of thing. You're living in a 4 meter upright height. In this world here, we take this thing all the way up to 6.4 meters on the
Oh,
upright as a standard right out of the box.
Yeah.
Now, there's some other things that we do with the warehouse building as well. It's got the 2-ply thermal roof panels that come along with that, and that's a big piece of it as well, because what that allows you to do, a lot of people that they're going out and they put the standard building up. It's just got the drop-in purlins and that type of thing. Well, this is something totally different than that. This 2-ply roof, this pillow roof that gets pressure to it is like 9 to 11 pounds of pressure. It's literally like going up and hitting a car tire when that thing's fully inflated. And the only way you can do that, you can't have drop-in purlins at that
Right.
point, because it'll just crush them as that thing's inflating. So this building's just designed and built. It bolt-on purlins, and we've had to take the time with our engineers to make sure that we get exactly what we're looking for, and we're not going to push this thing beyond. So, like, we know we can go to 30 meter and get 30 pounds, but if we go to 25, we know that we can get 42 pounds. If we go to 20, we can get 57 pounds. So we've done that engineering on each one of those sizes because it makes a difference.
Right.
In the temporary world, you just don't get that, right? You get a code. It's usually the maximum width, the big of that profile can do on the tallest leg, and it either meets that temporary code or it doesn't, right?
Right.
So that's kind of how it's worked in for us in this world.
Well, and since you've already hit on it, let's just jump right into it. Temporary codes and changes. I mean, there's a lot of those coming forward, especially with this style product. And just give us a little overview, because I know you have some knowledge of this, of the ASCE 722 and why it matters.
Well, it matters now because it's really interesting, and I'm not an engineer in any way, shape,
Right.
or form. I'm just a sales guy, but I've been involved in the engineering piece of it. At least at a 30,000 foot view. And what the 722 does is that it takes all of the reductions that you've been able to take out of the engineering over the last 10 different code changes that I've been doing this, and then what it doesn't, because it takes out any of those options to take reductions. It really, the way it used to work up until 722 came out was, it really was at the discretion of the company how much risk they wanted to take through the MRIs and reduction factors that you could take on those kind of things. So when you start taking those reductions, it starts affecting how much ballast you need on the plate. So it really comes down to the company that's going to send that engineering out and then put their name on it and start sending out their customers. What risk factor do you want to take in this thing? And Anchor's a fairly conservative company, and we're going to make sure from the engineering standpoint that when we tell you this is what it is, you can go to sleep that night and know that that's what it is. But in the engineering world on this building, it's to get this permanent code. Whereas they didn't really do this on the temporary buildings. They didn't combine wind and snow, right? It was a wind load, or you weren't even getting a snow load because it met the temporary code. In this world
Right.
here, it's a combined, wind and snow load that they're looking at when they're doing the engineering on these buildings. So, and for us, the segment that we want to be in, we like it up to about this 30 pound per square foot snow load. And right now that's been a good fit for us.
Yeah, there's been quite an impact on just permitting and engineering and safety standards as a whole recently. I feel like, it's been more of a push. And I remember way back when we first all went to Louisville and jumped in and came out with the codes books and everything else and tried to talk with those officials. And a lot of that stuff has either gone away, or it's been, people don't really talk about it as much. But you still got to get everything permitted, but not enough knowledge out there of everything currently. So what has been the impact on, just permanent engineering as a whole for you guys as a manufacturer lately?
Well, it's just become a different world for us. Because it's now you're literally, to some degree, depending on, how you're going to offer this building. You're literally acting as the general contractor now, from start to finish on these buildings. So if you're saying this building's doing all this stuff, meeting all this engineering, then it has to meet that engineering. So that's been a piece of it. And for us, we're trying to get this thing out to the customer and our customers educated with the permanent engineering side of the thing, because we've lived so long in this temporary world that, getting these people that are going to help us move these buildings and get it out there, they've got to have an education process as well. And so that's a big piece that we're working on right now to try to get that in a place where, as we're getting these buildings out, we're educating, our customers on, all the engineering behind it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And also with that, it feels like there's more of an importance of anchoring and, documentation and training as we move toward this whole, safe tenning standard, to try to get kind of things moving on that as well. What does it look like on your end just from anchoring and documentation on that kind of stuff as well?
It's interesting from the most manufacturer standpoints, and this is something that we're actually in debate on right now. Typically, when the manufacturer sells a building, they're taking responsibility from everything on that building from the base plate up, right? And in this world, and we all know that there's a base load reaction on whoever's product that is out there, and based on that base load reaction, there's studies and ballasting studies and things like that you can do in this world here with in the permanent world. That kind of is taken out of the equation. If it's going to be permanent building, then it's going to need the proper footings and foundation, and that's usually going to be an upfront thing that's known on the front end, so that we know when we're coming in and supplying this kind of anchor for this product on this location, we know we've met the engineering behind that.
Absolutely. And what do you think is next for Anchor? I mean, you guys are you guys come out with these two new products that are just amazing products, and they're both two totally different products, and they hit two different totally sides of the industry. The longer term, the bigger companies, you hit this Vixen that can be a little bit for everybody. Where do you see everything going? And just, are you guys going to dive in deeper with this stuff, or just what the trend is and things like that?
We're always looking for the new trends, and again, we hit on that a little bit earlier. We're all looking for the next new thing, and we've got designs. We have a group right now working on a new design on a product, and I don't have a lot of detail on it right now, but I know they've been back there working on it. But like for us, it's a couple of things. So it's certainly coming out with a new product, when the time is right, and striking that iron while it's hot. And that right now has been VXN for us, because we have not had an entry level type product into the ClearSpan. And then we've never had a product that is permanent and meets permanent code. I've been down this path, I don't know how many times, where a guy says, well, hey, just all you got to do is throw another cable in here. All you got to do is this. Well, at the end of the day, it's either engineered to meet it or it's not. And so I'd spent a lot of time in the early years, trying to figure out how, we could get it out there and just do the basic minimum to get it to that level. But then you have all the risk associated with it. And it just got to a point where we're just saying, hey, that's not the right product. We're trying to design something that's not designed to do, right? So these are two products are what they were designed to do, and that's going to be our focus right now. But we're always, we never walk away from, the new opportunity and what's next out there. And we'll continue to work on those things.
Well, I don't know about product, but now that you're in Nashville, we'll have to have a beer and sit down and talk it out and go through it. So, Mike, I appreciate you coming on today, giving us more insight on just what you guys got coming. I'm excited for it, just like everything else in this industry. We got some good trends and things coming through, and appreciate you telling us a little bit more about it today.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Nate. You guys have a great day.
All right, Mike. Have a good day. And this has been another episode of Under the Vinyl, a rental management media podcast.